The Story of Civilization, Part 2. The Life of Greece, being a history of Greek civilization from the beginnings and of civilization in the Near East, from the death of Alexander to the Roman conquest, with an introduction on the prehistoric culture of Crete by Durant. Chapter 24. Hellenism and the Orient. Section 1. The Seleucid Empire. As we move from the mainland through the Aegean into the Greek settlements in Asia and Egypt, we are surprised to find a fresh and flourishing life, and we perceive that the Hellenistic age saw not so much the decay of the dissemination of Greek civilization. From the end of the Peloponnesian War, a stream of Greek soldiers and immigrants had entered Asia. Alexander's conquests widened this stream by offering new opportunities and avenues to Hellenic enterprise. Seleucus, called Nicator, Victor, was distinguished among Alexander's generals as a man of courage, imagination, and unscrupulous generosity. It was characteristic of him that he gave his second wife, the beautiful Stratonica, to his son Demetrius when he learned that the boy was pining away for love of her. Antigonus I, challenging the allotment of Babylonia to Seleucus, set out to conquer for himself all the Near East. Seleucus and Ptolemy I defeated him at Gaza in 312. From that moment, the house of Seleucus dated the Seleucid Empire and a new era, a mode of reckoning that survived in Western Asia till Muhammad. Seleucus united under his scepter the old kingdoms and cultures of Elam, Samaria, Persia, Babylonia, Assyria, Syria, Phoenicia, and, at times, Asia Minor and Palestine. Of course, it wasn't Palestine until it was called that to insult the local inhabitants, but at Seleucia and Antioch, he built capitals richer and more populous than any ever known in mainland Greece. For Seleucia, he chose a site near the aged Babylon and the future Baghdad, almost at the junction of the Euphrates and the Tigris. It was conveniently located to attract a commerce between Mesopotamia and the Persian Gulf and beyond. Within half a century, it had a population of 600,000 souls, a motley mass of Asiatics, dominated by a minority of Greeks. On this site, Professor Leroy Waterman, in 1931, exhumed tablets indicating that one of the richest citizens of Seleucia had avoided the payment of taxes for 25 years. Antioch was similarly situated on the Orontes, not too far from its mouth to be reached by ocean shipping, yet sufficiently inland to be safe from naval attack, to tap the fertile fields of the river valley, and to draw the Mediterranean trade of northern Mesopotamia and Syria. Here the later Seleucid emperors established their residence, until under Antiochus IV it became the wealthiest city of Seleucid Asia, adorned with temples, porticos, theaters, gymnasiums, pilastras, flower gardens, landscape boulevards, and parks so beautiful that the garden of Daphne was known throughout Greece for its laurels and cypresses, its fountains and streams. Seleucus I was assassinated in 281 after 35 years of beneficent and popular rule. From his death, his empire began to disintegrate, torn with geographical and racial divisions, Valiant struggles for the throne and barbarian invasions on every side, Antiochus I, Satyr, savior, fought gallantly against the Gauls. Antiochus II, Theos, yeah, they called him a god, lived in a perpetual intoxication, as if again to illustrate the gamble of hereditary monarchy. His wife, Laodica, began that chain of intrigue which disrupted and finally ruined the royal house. Antiochus III, the Great, was a man of capacity and culture. I think the word would have been a magus. His bust in the Louvre shows a Greco-Macedonian with the courage of Macedon and the intelligence of Greece. He recaptured by untiring war most of the territory which the empire had lost since Seleucus I. He established a library at Antioch and promoted the literary movement that culminated in Leager of Gaza. At the close of the 2nd century, he preserved the Greek custom of municipal authority, writing to the cities that if he should order anything contrary to the laws, they should pay no attention, but assume that he had acted in ignorance. And Rumi does that with his poems too, that if anything conflicts with the Quran or the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, he says to disregard it. And that could be why Hafiz, some of the works of Hafiz were not preserved, because he didn't want the people to turn against religion because he had misspoke. He was ruined by ambition, imagination, and a flair for love. In 217, he was defeated by Ptolemy IV at Raphia and lost Phoenicia, Syria, and Palestine. He consoled himself by a victorious expedition into Bactria and India in 208, duplicitating the exploits of Alexander. Yehuda, or Judea, wouldn't have been Palestine except under conquering it and calling it as an insult, because the Jews had invented this Pleshtan insult. They wallow for the female Satan, That's, anyways. Lured by Hannibal into helping him against Rome, he landed an army at Euboea, fell in love at 50 with the pretty maid of Chalcis, courted her honorably, married her elaborately, forgot the war, and spent the winter enjoying his happiness. The Romans defeated him at Thermopylae, drove him into Asia Minor, and overwhelmed him at Magnesia. Restless, he plunged into another eastern campaign and died in its course in 187 BCE after a reign of 36 years. His son, Seleucus IV, loved peace, administered the empire with economy and wisdom, and was assassinated in 175 BCE. At that time, his younger brother was serving as archon at Athens, where he had gone to study philosophy. Hearing of Seleucus' death, he organized an army, marched to Antioch, deposed the assassin, and took the throne in 175 BCE. Antiochus IV was both the most interesting and the most erratic of his line, a rare mixture of intellect, insanity, and charm. He governed his kingdom ably, despite 1,000 injustices and absurdities. He allowed his delegates to abuse their power and gave his mistress authority over 3 cities. He was generous and cruel without judgment, often forgiving or condemning by whim, surprising simple folk with costly gifts, and tossing money with a child's ecstasy among the crowds in the street. He loved wine, women, and art. He drank to excess and left his royal seat at banquets to dance naked with entertainers, to carouse with wastrels. He was a bohemian whose dream of power had come true. He despised the solemnity and trappings of the court, played practical jokes upon his dignitaries, and disguised himself to know the luxury of anonymity. It delighted him to mingle with the people and overhear their comments on the king. He liked to wander among the shops of the artisans, watching and studying the works of engravers and jewelers, and discussing with them the technical details of their craft, he felt a sincere enthusiasm for Greek art, literature, and thought. He made Antioch, for a century, the art center of the Greek world. He paid artists handsomely to set up statuary and temples in other cities of Hellas. He redecorated the shrine of Apollo at Delos, built a theater for Tegea, and financed the competition of the Olympium at Athens. Having lived 14 impressionable years in Rome, he had imbibed a taste for republican institutions, a type of government, not, and as if to foreshadow Augustus, it pleased his humor and policy to clothe his monarchical power in the forms of republican freedom. The chief effect of his passion for things Roman was the introduction of gladiatorial games in Antioch, his capital. The people resented the brutal sport, but Antiochus won them over by lavish and spectacular displays. When they became accustomed to the butchery, he considered their degeneration a personal victory. It was characteristic of him that he began as an ardent follower of the Stoics and ended as an easy convert to the Epicureans. He enjoyed his own qualities so keenly that he labeled his coins Antiochus, Theos, Epiphanes, the god made manifest, overreaching himself in the manner of his imagination. As an imaginative kind, he attempted to conquer Egypt in 169 BCE. He was succeeding when Rome herself, a candidate for the Egyptian plum, ordered him to retire from African soil. Antiochus asked another time to consider, but the Roman envoy, Papilius, drew a circle in the sand around Antiochus and bade him decide before stepping over its line. Antiochus yielded in a fury, plundered the temple at Jerusalem to restore his treasury, sought glory like his father in a campaign against the eastern tribes, and died in Persia along the way of epilepsy, madness, or disease. Well, could have been a combination of all three, right?